These are the kinds of stories that permanently change the way people sleep at night. All three of these stories were sent in by women who said the same thing afterward. They no longer feel completely safe in their own homes. And honestly, after reading what happened to them, it's easy to understand why. Because none of these stories involve ghosts, monsters, or anything supernatural. Just real people watching, waiting, and getting closer than they ever should have. I want to preface this by saying that all three of these stories were sent in by women who specifically asked me not to use their real names. I'll be referring to them by the names they chose. And I also want to say up front that these are the kinds of stories that stay with you, not necessarily because of how violent they are, but because of how easily they could have ended differently. Mara's story was the one that unsettled me the most. At the time, Mara was 24 and living alone for the first time in her life. She lived in a small third-floor apartment just outside Columbus. Nothing special about the place. Thin walls. One elevator that constantly smelled like cigarette smoke. A basement laundry room she avoided using at night. She'd lived there for about 8 months and had never had a single problem. This happened on a Thursday night in January. Mara remembered the exact day because she had just finished working a double shift and was completely exhausted. She ordered food through DoorDash, ate on the couch while watching TV, and fell asleep before 10. Completely normal night. Nothing felt off. At some point during the night, though, she woke up suddenly. She said she never figured out what woke her. Her apartment was completely dark and quiet. She lay there for a few seconds doing that thing where you wait to see if your brain randomly pulled you out of sleep or if something actually caused it. At first, she heard nothing. Then she heard it. A knock at her front door. Soft. Almost polite. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. She checked her phone. 2:17 a.m. At first, she assumed it was probably the guy across the hall. Apparently, he occasionally locked himself out after drinking, and she'd helped him a couple times before. So she got out of bed, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No movement. No sound. Nothing. She stood there for a few more seconds before eventually convincing herself whoever it was had already left. Then she went back to sleep. The next morning, she barely even thought about it. Not until she opened her apartment door to leave for work. Right outside the door was a single muddy footprint. Just one, pointing toward her apartment, not away from it. She stared at it for almost a full minute, then did what most people probably would have done. She rationalized it. Maybe it had already been there. Maybe she just hadn't noticed it before. So she left for work and tried not to think about it. 2 nights later, it happened again. Same knocking. Same 3 slow taps. And almost the exact same time. This time, Mara reacted immediately. She got up and rushed straight to the peephole. She caught a glimpse of someone walking away down the hallway. All she could really make out was dark clothing and a hooded jacket before the person disappeared around the corner toward the stairwell. That was the first moment she genuinely felt uneasy, because her apartment building required a key fob to enter after dark. Whoever had been knocking on her door wasn't some random person wandering in from outside. They belonged there, or at least they had access to the building. The next day, she called the non-emergency police line and reported it. The person she spoke to was polite, but it clearly wasn't being treated as an emergency. Honestly, she understood that. At that point, all she really had was strange knocking. Still, the feeling stuck with her. So she asked her building manager if they could check the entrance camera footage from both nights. To his credit, he agreed immediately. They reviewed the footage together in his office later that afternoon. And at first, it actually made Mara feel a little better. Because around 2 a.m. on both nights, the camera clearly showed someone entering through the main entrance. Same height, same dark jacket, hood up both times. But then they kept watching. And things got worse. Because the person never left. The building only had one monitored exit. And over the next several hours of footage, the person never came back out. Not once. Her building manager even checked in too the following morning. Nothing. No footage of the person leaving. No footage of them entering another apartment either. Just gone. Somewhere inside the building. Mara moved out less than 3 weeks later. She broke her lease, paid the penalty fee, and left. To this day, she still has no idea who was knocking on her door at 2 in the morning. But the part that still bothers her isn't even the knocking. It's the fact that whoever it was remained somewhere inside that building afterward. And she has no idea where or for how long. Dani said she needed to explain a little bit about her life first, otherwise none of what happened later would really make sense. She's a nurse and works rotating shifts, which means her schedule changes constantly. Some weeks she works nights, other weeks mornings. Sometimes she barely even remembers what day it is. At the time of this story, she was living alone in a rented house in a quiet neighborhood in Tennessee. She'd been there for about 3 years and had always felt safe. She knew her neighbors, knew the street. Nothing bad had ever happened there. Then small things started changing. At first, it was subtle enough that she blamed herself. A kitchen chair slightly pulled away from the table. A cabinet left barely open. Her phone charger sitting on the opposite side of the nightstand. Tiny things. Easy things to dismiss. And she did dismiss them. Repeatedly. She worked long shifts and was constantly exhausted, so forgetting little details seemed completely reasonable. But eventually it became harder to ignore. Because Dani described herself as extremely routine-oriented. She always pushed her chairs back in. Always closed cabinets fully. Always left her charger on the left side of the bed. Then one evening she came home after a 12-hour shift and walked into the bathroom. Her shower curtain was closed. Completely. She immediately froze. Because she always left it pulled fully open to the left side after showering. Always. She stood in the doorway staring at it for several seconds before finally pulling it back. Nobody was there. But something about it genuinely scared her this time. She called her sister that night and asked her to stay over for a few days. Together, they checked every door, every window, every lock. Everything appeared secure. Eventually, Dani convinced herself she was overreacting. About a week later, her Ring camera suddenly went offline. That had never happened before. She tried resetting it multiple times but couldn't get it working again, so she ordered a replacement camera. While setting up the new one, she went back through the saved footage from the old camera. Most of it was normal. Cars passing by. Packages getting delivered. Her leaving for work. But then she found a motion alert clip from about 3 weeks earlier that she never remembered watching. The clip was 42 seconds long. It showed a man standing beside her house near a side window. Not moving. Not walking past. Just standing there. Watching the window. The entire duration of the clip. 42 seconds. Completely motionless. She couldn't clearly make out his face, but she knew immediately he wasn't anyone she recognized. And somehow that made it worse. Because it meant this wasn't a misunderstanding. The man wasn't lost. He wasn't passing by. He was there intentionally. Danny brought the footage to police, and to their credit, they actually took it seriously. Patrol cars spent more time around her neighborhood for the next couple weeks. But nobody was ever identified. She replaced all her locks after that, installed additional cameras, and stopped keeping any predictable routines whenever possible. But she still lives in that house. And according to her, she sleeps differently now. Lighter. Like part of her brain never fully shuts off anymore. Renee's story happened about 2 years ago, and she said she's only recently gotten comfortable enough to even talk about it. At the time, she was 29 and living alone in a first-floor apartment in Georgia. It was actually a nice complex, gated parking, quiet area, decent management. The kind of place that makes you stop thinking about security after a while. The first thing that happened barely even registered to her at the time. One evening, she was on the phone with her mom while walking through her living room when she noticed a dark sedan parked directly across from her apartment. Someone was sitting inside. She didn't think much of it. People sat in their cars all the time. But the next night, the same car was there again. Same spot. By the fourth consecutive night, she started feeling uneasy. That night, she turned off her living room lights and stood near the window, watching the car from inside the dark apartment. She could barely make out the silhouette of someone in the driver's seat. Occasionally, she'd see the faint glow of a phone lighting up their face. She reported it to apartment management the next morning. For 2 days after that, the car disappeared. And for the first time all week, she relaxed. Then, it came back. This time, she photographed the vehicle and contacted police. An officer eventually came out and spoke to the driver. According to the officer, the man claimed he was waiting for a friend. Legally, there wasn't much police could do. The man hadn't technically committed a crime. Still, Renee couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, especially because she had never seen him before in her life. About a week later, the phone calls started. Always late at night. Always from blocked or unknown numbers. She never answered any of them. But every time she blocked one number, another one would start calling. Then, one morning, she found the small potted plant on her patio laying on its side. Not knocked over. Placed there, deliberately. Her patio gate only unlocked from the inside. That's when the fear became real. She knew how all of it sounded individually. A parked car. Late-night phone calls. A moved plant. None of those things sound terrifying on their own. But when you're the person living through it, when you know deep down the incidents are connected, it changes the way your brain works. Renee installed a second lock on her patio door that same night. A few days later, one of her friends came to stay over because Renee had become too uncomfortable sleeping alone. Then one night, just after midnight, she heard something outside on the patio. Not loud, just presence. Movement. She slowly walked toward the sliding glass door and froze. A man was standing directly outside the glass, completely still, facing her. She said she couldn't even scream. Her body just locked up. After a few seconds, she backed away slowly, grabbed her phone, and called 911 while waking up her friend. By the time police arrived, the man was gone. But one of the responding officers noticed something important. The secondary lock Renee had installed on the patio door had been tampered with. According to him, it looked like someone had been trying to force it open from outside. The investigation eventually connected the parked car, the phone calls, and the patio incident to a man living less than a mile away. Renee had never met him before. Nobody could figure out why he targeted her. A restraining order was eventually filed, and the man was later charged with stalking. Renee moved out 2 months later, and according to her, she'll never live in a first-floor apartment again. The thing she still thinks about most is the silhouette outside the glass. How long he had been standing there before she noticed him, and whether that lock would have held if she hadn't woken up when she did.